chambers over those 27 years on the High Court, and what an honor they will pay her today on the steps of the Supreme Court as they await her casket. They will be honorary pallbearers. They are expected to be among thousands who will pay their respects today and again tomorrow, before she becomes the first woman to lie in state at the U.S. Capitol on Friday, a unique honor for a woman who fought for equal justice under the law for decades. We want to continue to watch this scene unfold at the Supreme Court and bring in our longtime Supreme Court correspondent, Pete Williams, who is there for us. Pete, good morning. It feels that these ceremonies have really been designed with a nod to the advocacy that she made the center of her life.
Well, of course, the Supreme Court is a place where tradition reigns, and these are the traditional ways they begin this ceremony, but this one will be different. Let me set the scene for you a little bit. For people not familiar with Washington, D.C., we're literally right across the street from the U.S. Capitol building. Now the justices of the court are coming out. Other clerks continue to come out. There's well over 100 of them here. These people are now law professors, lawyers. There's one Supreme Court Justice, Goodwin Liu of California, is here. They are the honorary pallbearers. The pallbearers themselves will be Supreme Court security officers. And what is different about this ceremony is it will start out the normal way, where unfortunately there is a normal way to do these things when people who are in active service die on the bench. Her casket will arrive. It will go in the court, up those stairs where the clerks are now, up those marble steps, through the columns, through those massive bronze doors, and into what's called the Supreme Court's Great Hall. That's where the private ceremony will be with close friends, family, and the other Supreme Court justices. And then when that ceremony is over, and this is a break from tradition, this is different, a nod to the pandemic, the casket will actually come back outside. And here's it looks like the casket is about to arrive here. It will come back outside and be under the massive portico just behind those front columns. And that's where she'll remain for 2 days to allow members of the public to come by here. Now, it's our understanding that people will not be able to actually file past the casket as they would if it were in the Great Hall. They'll be able to come here to the Supreme Court front steps and stand on the sidewalk. But it looks like the casket is now arriving, and the Supreme Court police officers, the Supreme Court security officers are preparing to bring it up these massive marble steps. You know, this is 27 years since Ruth Bader Ginsburg arrived here as a justice. Excuse me. But it was 49 years ago when she first came here to argue her first case in the Supreme Court, beginning this long string of advocacy that persuaded the Supreme Court that discrimination between men and women, what she called gender discrimination, was unconstitutional. And by the way, we're told that she actually called it gender discrimination when she argued the case because her secretary said it might be a little too racy to call it sex discrimination. So she called it gender discrimination and persuaded the court that that kind of discrimination violated the Constitution.
Well, Pete, as we watch this scene unfold, you're not the only one who has a lump in his throat. We see it looks like hundreds, maybe thousands of people there coming to pay respects to Justice Ginsburg, who had such an impact on the life of the law. You mentioned her early days as she came as an advocate. I think one of the most interesting things about her, Pete, is her legal strategy in the early days was to get gender equality, represent men.
That's right. Her first case involved, was actually a case from Idaho about whether men or women could have precedence in the legal machinations over disposing of estates. And she said that it was discrimination against men, and the court agreed.
And we're watching her casket now lifted out of the hearse, and in a moment it will be escorted and carried up the stairs. Let's just pause a minute and take in this moment. the sight of the law clerks socially distanced, but what a dramatic scene that was as the justice was brought up the stairs and into the court. Pete Williams, we have not seen the fellow justices. I assume they will greet her casket inside?
That's right. They'll be inside the Great Hall along with close members of her family and also friends of the justice. And then we'll hear remarks from the Chief Justice, John Roberts, who, of course, served as an advocate. He argued cases before Ginsburg when she was on the Supreme Court, when she was on the Court of Appeals down the street here in Washington, where she met her friend Antonin Scalia, who also became a Supreme Court justice. That very unlikely friendship between those two, who had very different views of the law, but were very close friends, united by a great intellect and a love of opera. And then we'll hear remarks from Rabbi Lauren Holtzblatt, who is from here in Washington. Her husband, Ari, was a Supreme Court clerk for Justice Ginsburg 6 terms ago.
And Pete, as we watch this moment unfold where the casket is brought into that inner sanctum of the Supreme Court, which is the most magnificent and mysterious piece of our history, it's going to be placed on the Lincoln catafalque, which is the riser, essentially, that held Abraham Lincoln's body and was loaned for this moment to Ruth Bader Ginsburg by the United States Capitol. I want to bring in Professor Neil Katyal, former acting Solicitor General, who found himself before Ginsburg and the High Court many, many times in his career. What was it like, Neil, to know that you were arguing before Ruth Bader Ginsburg?
It was, Savannah, like arguing in front of a legend. And today's the day none of us who appeared before her wanted to see. She was one of the most influential Americans ever. To me, the most fitting thing that just happened was watching her casket come under the words of the Supreme Court at the top, because on the words of the court are equal justice under law. And there is no American in our lifetimes who embodied that in everything she did more than her. And so it's really fitting to see her rest in the Great Hall of the Supreme Court, where she made those words a modern day reality for so many people. And your emotion, Pete's emotion, is the emotion of all of us at this moment. Really, we've lost one of the greatest Americans to have ever lived.
And Neil, just on a personal note, as we see the other justices there paying respect to her, her collegiality on the court is a huge part of her legacy as well.
Exactly. She was beloved by her colleagues, whether they're conservative or not. And she wasn't like, some pushover and just trying to get along for the sake of getting along. She could be biting in her written opinions, in her questioning of advocates, in her questioning of other justices. But it was always on the up and up. It was always in service of a higher goal, which is why I think her colleagues respected her so much, regardless of ideology.
Let's listen in.
I believe the ceremony is about to begin. You see Chief Justice Roberts there. People will be invited to take their seats now. As we wait for the ceremony to begin, let me quickly bring in Erin Carmen. She's the co-author of Notorious RBG. Erin, her story, with all due respect, has been an open book for decades. Why did it resonate over the last few years, and certainly now in her death?
Well, Lester, before there was the resistance, there was Justice Ginsburg putting on her dissent color. It was in 2013 that she dissented from the bench, actually breaking the record, which basically means that instead of seeing just a written dissent, everybody in the courtroom has to listen to her protest. Justice Ginsburg used her voice to resist what the court was doing, in that case, in a voting rights case and several other civil rights related cases. And that captured the imagination of young people. My co-author dubbed her the notorious RBG. People put signs all over Washington that said, "You can't spell truth without Ruth." And as people learn more about her story, both her personal story, somebody who had a wonderful partnership with her husband, somebody who overcame enormous discrimination, both as a woman, a mother, and a Jew, as she used to put it, and also somebody who really fought throughout the 1970s to guarantee women equal status under the U.S. Constitution, something that had been denied for more than a century. So I think it started out with this vision of her in that dissenting color, speaking truth to power, and it expanded as people learned more about her.
All right, we want to go back inside the court now as everyone has taken their seats.
Blessed is God, the true judge. Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach, yehi shem Adonai mevarach. God has given, God has taken. Praise be the name of Adonai. Psalm 23. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, binodeh sheyar bitzeni. Amei menuchot yenahaleni, nafshi yishovev yancheni v'magle tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech b'ketz hamavet lo irara, ki ata himadi shiftecha umishantecha hema yenachamuni. Ta'aroch lefanai shulcha neged tzorai, dishanta v'shemen roshi. Kosi revaya, achta v'chesed yardfuni kol yamei chayai, v'shafti b'veit Adonai le'orech yamim. A Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures. God leads me beside the still waters. God restores my soul. God guides me in the straight paths for God's name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai forever. Today we stand in mourning of an American hero, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. In a moment, I will speak to what she meant to all of us, but first, I would like to turn to her beloved family. The Justice was a mother, a grandmother, and as we all know, had one of the most extraordinary life partners in her beloved Marty. To each of you, to the Justice's colleagues, to her law clerks, and to her court family, the country mourns with you and sends you our deepest love and comfort. To be born into a world that does not see you, that does not believe in your potential, that does not give you a path for opportunity or a clear path for education. And despite this, to be able to see beyond the world you are in, to imagine that something can be different. That is the job of a prophet. And it is the rare prophet who not only imagines a new world, but also makes that new world a reality in her lifetime. This was the brilliance and vision of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The Torah is relentless in reminding, in instructing, in commanding that we never forget those who live in the shadows, those whose freedom and opportunity are not guaranteed. 36 times we are taught that we must never forget the stranger. 12 times we are told to care for the widow and the orphan. This is one of the most important commandments of the Torah. It is the Torah's call to action. And it is also the promise written into our Constitution. As Justice Ginsburg said, and I quote, "Think back to 1787, Who were we the people? They certainly weren't women. They surely weren't people held in human bondage. The genius of our Constitution is that now, over more than 200, sometimes turbulent years, that we has expanded and expanded. This was Justice Ginsburg's life's work, to insist that the Constitution deliver on its promise, that we, the people, would include all the people. She carried out that work in every chapter of her life. As an advocate arguing 6 times before this court for equal treatment for women and men, as a judge on the DC circuit, and as a justice on this court, and as a path-marking role model to women and girls of all ages, who now know that no office is out of reach for their dreams, whether that is to serve in the highest court of our land or closer to home for me as the rabbi of their community. Nothing could stop Justice Ginsburg's unflagging devotion to this project, not even cancer. Justice Ginsburg, midor lador, from generation to generation, we promise to carry forward your legacy. May you rest under the wings of the Shekhinah, knowing that you have tirelessly served us and this great country, the United States of America. Please rise. El male rachamim shochein b'maromim hametzei menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashchina b'malot kedoshim uteharim kezohar harakia mazhirim et nishmat yitarucha batzir leah shelcha leolama Began Hayden to Hay Menuchata Ana Bala Rachamim Astireha Beseter Knafecha Leolamim Utzror Bitzror Achayim Anishmata Adonai Hu Nachalata V'tanuach B'shalom Amishkeva V'nomar Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure to the soul of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.
That was Rabbi Lauren Holtzblatt officiating the service. She's actually married to one of Ginsburg's law clerks. And now we'll hear from the Chief Justice.
Thank you, Rabbi Holtzblatt, for those compelling words. Jane, Jim, the entire Ginsburg family, on behalf of all the justices, the spouses of the justices, and the entire Supreme Court family, I offer our heartfelt condolences on the loss of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. That loss is widely shared, but we know that it falls most heavily on the family. Justice Ginsburg's life was one of the many versions of the American dream. Her father was an immigrant from Odessa. Her mother was born 4 months after her family arrived from Poland. Her mother later worked as a bookkeeper in Brooklyn. Ruth used to ask, what is the difference between a bookkeeper in Brooklyn and a Supreme Court justice? Her answer, 1 generation. It has been said that Ruth wanted to be an opera virtuoso, but became a rock star instead. But she chose the law. Subjected to discrimination in law school and the job market because she was a woman, Ruth would grow to become the leading advocate fighting such discrimination in court. She was not an opera star, but she found her stage right behind me in our courtroom. There, she won famous victories that helped move our nation closer to equal justice under law, to the extent that women are now a majority in law schools, not simply a handful. Later, she became a star on the bench, where she sat for 27 years. Her 483 majority, concurring, and dissenting opinions will steer the court for decades. They are written with the unaffected grace of precision. Her voice in court and in our conference room was soft, but when she spoke, people listened. Among the words that best describe Ruth, tough, brave, a fighter, a winner, but also thoughtful, careful, compassionate, honest. When it came to opera, insightful, passionate. When it came to sports, clueless. Justice Ginsburg had many virtues of her own, but she also unavoidably promoted one particular one, humility in others. For example, on more than a few occasions, someone would approach or call me and describe some upcoming occasion or event that was important to them, and I knew what was coming. Could I come and speak? But no, instead, could I pass along an invitation to Justice Ginsburg and put in a good word? Many of you have seen the famous picture of Justice Scalia and Justice Ginsburg riding atop an elephant in India. It captured so much of Ruth. There she was, doing something totally unexpected, just as she had in law school, where she was not only one of the few women, but a new mother to boot. And in the photograph, she is riding with a dear friend, a friend with totally divergent views. There is no indication in the photo that either was poised to push the other off. For many years, of course, Ruth battled serious illness. She met each of those challenges with a combination of candid assessment and fierce determination. In doing so, she encouraged others who have their own battles with illness, including employees here in the court. And she emerged victorious, time and again, against all odds. But finally, the odds won out, and now Ruth has left us. I mentioned at the outset that Ruth's passing weighed most heavily on her family, and that is true. But the court was her family too. This building was her home too. Of course, she will live on in what she did to improve the law and the lives of all of us. And yet, still, Ruth is gone, and we grieve. Let us have a moment of silence for reflection. May she rest in peace.
As we watch the procession and reflect on the comments we've heard this morning, I want to bring in NBC's senior Washington correspondent, Andrea Mitchell, who, of course, has covered the court and covered Washington, but also was a personal friend of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And Andrea, I just was thinking as the Chief Justice was speaking about what a different world it was when Ruth Bader Ginsburg graduated from law school. Top of her class, couldn't even get a job because she was a woman. And what a different world she helped to make.
Exactly. I was also struck by what the rabbi said. The rabbi was married to a former clerk to Justice Ginsburg, saying that women of all professions now can imagine new roles for themselves, including the rabbi, because women back in the 50s and 60s could not be rabbis in the Jewish faith. I only adjusted to having a woman rabbi on the podium, on the bima, as they say in a synagogue, in my adult life. And that is also part of the transition. Women couldn't fly planes. Women couldn't be in combat. She lost her civil service job in Oklahoma when her husband was in the military before they even went to Harvard Law because she got pregnant. And that alone was enough to have her lose her job, even though she scored so high on the civil service exams. So all of that. And I really was struck by Justice Roberts talking about how the family, of course, grieves most of all, but that the Supreme Court was also her family. This court was also her home, and that they are suffering the loss and grieving. Talking about her friendship with Justice Scalia, which has been so well noted, those pictures of them on the elephant on a joint family vacation in India, Savannah, and said that there's no sign, because despite their divergent views, that either of them was about to push the other off. She was so known for the collegiality that she said was a central mission of the court, and that is how, in all of her majority and dissenting opinions and concurring opinions, how he said her voice was a soft voice, but in the conference room where they gathered, it was always heard. People would always listen because she had developed those relationships, and that is how she was so persuasive. That, her intellect, her discipline, her hard work, and just the person she was, kind and caring. I found myself gripped with emotion when the casket arrived, the hearse arrived just a few yards from where we are out front here, and saw the clerks, her current clerks, as honorary pallbearers. The emotion here, from the police officers of the Supreme Court right up the steps to the clerks and the justices who were arrayed at social distance in that great hall, and their families, their spouses, all extraordinary today.
Well, it is an end of an era. Her legacy will live on through the 483 opinions, majority, dissenting, concurring, that she wrote for the court, Andrea. But I do want to ask you, what was she like as a friend? What was she like in person?
She had the greatest sense of humor. She had a dry wit, but she was so mentoring to younger people, people who followed. The devotion of her clerks and of women and people who didn't even know her reflects the care that she gave to everyone she met. And to me, she was just such a decent, inspiring person, especially through her struggles with cancer. I've not seriously, but had my own struggle with cancer. She inspired, as the Chief Justice said, all of those, even on the court staff, with her grit and her determination, her fierce candor about it. That's certainly an indication that she was very honest with him as the chief about what she was going through, but also her tenacity in surviving all odds, both in her professional career, her personal career, and in her fight against this terrible disease.
Andrea, we want to bring in right now Washington Post columnist Ruth Marcus. She's been watching this ceremony along with us. And Ruth, one thing I'm struck is we don't have time to catch our breath anymore in the world we're living in. We barely got news of Justice Ginsburg passing on Friday night, and we were on, of course, to the drama over who will replace us. This moment, this brief ceremony, the walk up the steps, really seemed like a necessary grounding moment for us to take that pause and take that breath and remember not only the power of the Supreme Court, but this particular justice, what she accomplished and how she moved the needle in so many ways.
Indeed, she did, and it has been a little bit mind-boggling and dizzying, and not a little upsetting, the degree to which we have moved almost instantly from the sadness of Justice Ginsburg's death and the legacy of her amazing career to, I guess, is the default position in Washington these days, which is talking about the politics. But Andrea and I were both in the Rose Garden at the White House on that day 27 years ago when Justice Ginsburg was nominated and by President Clinton. And no one could have imagined that day. Everybody understood how important she had been as the Thurgood Marshall, really, of the women's rights movement in terms of creating equal legal rights for women. But no one could have imagined back then that she was going to turn into someday this moniker that she just really reveled in, which was the notorious RBG. At that time, people were concerned that she was going to be too moderate a justice. And in fact, some of the women's groups that she had worked alongside with were concerned in particular about her view on abortion rights and how those were grounded. And so there was that her evolution into this liberal icon was not expected, but it is a reflection not just of her tenacity, but of the changing court that she joined and how much more conservative it has become and how much more conservative it seems destined to be with her absence and with her seat being filled, as it appears it will be, by President Trump.
And Ruth, on that note, we'll turn to NBC's White House correspondent, Peter Alexander. Peter, as you know, the plan here is to have the casket lie in repose on the steps of the court so that the public may pay respects. And one of those members is expected to be the president himself, coming to the Supreme Court with the First Lady to honor Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Yeah, Savannah, that's right. We learned from the White House this morning that President Trump and the First Lady Melania Trump are expected to pay their respects, in the words of the White House, to the late justice tomorrow at the Supreme Court, where she will be lying in repose. Of course, that's notable because the president's already made it clear that he's not going to respect the fervent wish, in the words of Ruth Bader Ginsburg herself, that it would be the next president who would ultimately determine who would replace her on the court. The president expected to attend tomorrow. We have seen him have his past bickering with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And even as we anticipate that, President Trump is moving ahead, full steam ahead, in fact, with his plans to replace Ginsburg on the court. He says he will make an announcement Saturday afternoon with his desire that the Senate, and it appears all the obstacles have been cleared, that Senate Republicans would be able to vote and likely confirm whoever that pick is before the upcoming election. Right now, notably, the president's only that we know of met with at least one candidate, a judge by the name of Amy Coney Barrett. She's a 48-year-old, a mother of 7, a former professor at Notre Dame University. And in many ways, in terms of their view of the law, she really is the polar opposite of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So as we celebrate the loss of Ginsburg today, it does appear clear that there will be a very different sort of direction that the court heads into in the future.
All right, Peter, thank you. Let's go to NBC's Capitol Hill correspondent Casey Hunt right now, who will talk a little bit more about what is to come now. Democrats realizing they have no mechanism to stop the nomination of and confirmation of another replacement Supreme Court justice. So give us a sense of the temperature on Capitol Hill right now.
They really don't have very many options, Lester, and I get the sense that there is a sense of sadness in some ways that's settled in with Democrats who realize there's nothing they can do to give Ruth Bader Ginsburg her dying wish, as well as a continued current of anger for that same reality. And Mitch McConnell is pressing forward with a confirmation hearing and likely a vote, possibly even before Election Day, again, over the objections of that dying wish of Ruth Bader Ginsburg that the next president should pick whoever was to succeed her on the court. But Lester, we also want to note that there still, of course, is going to be a period for members of both parties at the Capitol to mourn Ruth Bader Ginsburg after she lies in repose here at the Supreme Court. On Friday, she's going to lie in state at the U.S. Capitol in Statuary Hall, and she'll be the first woman to have that honor. Rosa Parks lay in honor. That's an honor that's reserved for private citizens, but it really says something that we've not had a government official for whom lying in state is reserved who's been a woman, who's been honored with that tradition in our country. So yet another first for the trailblazing Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And also, Lester, worth noting that the women members of Congress are going to have the first chance to pay their respects to Ginsburg to view her casket at the Capitol. They are going to go in alphabetical groups because of social distancing and coronavirus, but it will be women members who will get the first chance in the first two of those groups before all women and men members will be able to file through to pay their respects. Lester.
Casey, thank you. As we look at the Supreme Court, and they are now preparing the portico where Justice Ginsburg will lie in repose, and the public can pay their respects. Casey, thanks. We'll have more coverage throughout the day on MSNBC, NBC Nightly News, and streaming on NBC News Now. But for now, we'll return most of you to today. I'm Lester Holt, along with Savannah Guthrie. This has been an NBC News Special Report.